Chapter 15. The Interstellar Slave Trade. It was a bizarre convoy that moved through the Weeping Ghost Nebula. 2 Savanti corvettes led the way, followed by a hastily assembled colony ship. Roughly 10 AUs behind was the Caravaneer fleet. Some 50 starships flew together in a loose formation, ranging in size from cruiser-sized galleons down to the diminutive but speedy corsairs. The Coalition warship Marathon followed behind the Caravaneers, deploying squadrons of starfighters to create a protective screen around the Caravaneers and Savanti allies. Even further behind, about 60 AUs distant, the Destican flotilla brought up the rear. Araj's flagship Kailasha kept out of weapons range, but stayed close enough to pose a threat to Marathon and her allies. Aboard the Marathon, Ino and her crew were feeling the effects of crisis fatigue. They had to keep track of the enemy fleet, plot the return journey to Earth, repair the ship's damaged systems, and manage a tense relationship with the Caravaneers. Ino, Sota, Elodie, Prisbin, and Rylan gathered in the CIC, along with several other officers and team leaders, to figure out their situation. If we don't take any long stops or detours, then we're roughly 3 months away from Earth, Ino announced. If we find a functional hyper-relay, travel time is cut to 4 weeks. You should add a week to those calculations, Sota told her. Repair crews are falling behind on their work. Marathon's maximum acceleration has been reduced another 2 meters per second squared. What systems are still down? Ino asked. Impulse thrusters are still damaged, Sota replied, along with auxiliary fire control, the cloaking field generator, the starboard cloaking sails, the heavy water reclaimer, and the tertiary sensor systems. Runway 3 down in the hangar is still cratered, but our air wing is under strength, so we don't have need for it yet. Why are repairs taking so long? The cosmic storm is stopping us from working on the external damage, Prisbin reported. We've been experiencing gravitational anomalies for the past day and a half. Damage control teams have aborted their planned spacewalks because the risk assessment forms came back too high. Ino swore. The Caravaneers did offer access to their repair teams again, Sota told her. Same price as before. I already turned them down for you. Sota and Ino shared a grim look. At that moment, the voice of Axiom sounded from the intercom. The Vangralian Trium are aware of the Destican warships following us. I am monitoring their communications as we speak. The Caravaneer known as Aranoe has been asking her subordinates to create a battle plan that treats Marathon as a potential ally. Still not sure how I feel about that, Ino remarked. What about our POWs? Axiom figured out the basic life needs of the Marauder prisoners, Sota said. We are giving them food, water, medical treatment, and a place to sleep in accordance with the Guardian Angels Act. Sota was referring to an interplanetary version of the laws of armed conflict. Ino nodded and directed her next question at Elodie. Have we learned anything through interrogation? Plenty, Elodie replied. The Destican Astral Fellowship hired them to act specifically as abductors. They're the ones who've been doing the heavy lifting on the mass kidnapping of sentients ever since the war began. This particular batch of marauders came from a fleet called the Outrider Corolla. They're under the direct employ of Araj Zilfalin, and, well... Elodie hesitated, looking at Ino and biting her lip. Then she found the resolve to continue. Well, they've got orders to capture you, Captain. You specifically. They were all shown pictures of you and given clear instructions to make sure you were taken alive. None of them know why, but a few of the lower-ranking grunts have theories. Ino shuddered. She felt as though someone had dumped a bucket of ice on her. Honestly, I think I've got some theories, Ino confessed. She still did not know how Araj had managed to make himself appear aboard the Marathon, but she was starting to process his words and behavior. and she was starting to get worried. Any other updates? News? Sota and Prisbin nodded. We've started to pick up FTL comm signals from inhabited worlds, Prisbin said. Unfortunately, none of them are aimed at us, but... What? Ino asked, dreading the answer. What is it? They're painting a grim picture, Prisbin said. This space storm we're caught in, it's getting bigger. Astrometeorologists are starting to consider creating a new class of cosmic storm just to explain what we're dealing with. Ino quickly reminded herself of the 6 types of cosmic storms: electric, gravity, magnetic, particle, radiant, and stardust. Some of these, like the current gravity storm, were an inconvenience to starships. Others were particularly harmful, especially to life-bearing planets. As of this moment, we think the cosmic storm is affecting some 3,000 star systems, with the epicenter being near the spot where Dicronia used to be, Prisbin added. Any word from our governments? Ino asked. What are they doing about the storm? Sota gulped. That's the bad news, he said. As far as we can tell, Savassia took the full brunt of a particle storm. Our sensors have detected confused transmissions, people trying to contact the Savanti government and not getting through. There's also radio silence from their wartime capital. It's as though the Savanti government evaporated. Which is actually possible, given the circumstances, Prisbin added grimly. But Captain, we haven't even gotten to the worst part yet. Oh, God, Ino breathed. Earth was hit by the leading edge of the storm, Sota said. Best we can tell, President Horner was on Mars when it happened. He was touring the terraforming towers when the radioactive wave hit. Ino's eyes went wide. The president is dead? She gasped. Along with half of the cabinet and a few members of the UN Parliament, Sota said. Earth is unstable right now. Political parties and factions are scrambling to fill the power vacuum. Snap elections all over human territory. But who is in charge now? Ino asked. For the moment, Lal Santosh from the Indian People's Party is the acting president, Prisbin said. But the Chinese Communist Party and the Justicialist Alliance are mounting serious challenges to her leadership. She isn't going to last. Ino frowned. Justicialist Alliance? She inquired. 3 smaller parties who agreed to work together, Sota replied. The American Democrats, Indian National Congress, and the Synthetic Solidarity. The AI rights movement, Ino said. They're making a play for the presidency? Yes, and I think the Pathfinder Order is helping them, Prisbin added. I've been out of contact with my own people since this whole crisis started, but I can see the signs. Ino frowned in thought, and then the full impact of what this meant hit her. Wait a minute. Have you picked up any communications about the war? About coalition ships on the far side of the wormhole? We've heard a few broadband messages from Strategic Command, Sota said. They've relocated to Omicron Persei and are trying to regain contact with the fleets. I've had comms officer Indungane transmitting signals to them every 6 hours. No response so far. After thinking for a few moments, Ino voiced her darkest thought aloud. Have we been forgotten? Does Stratcom even know we're out here? A grim expression on Sota and Prisbin's faces gave Ino her answer. We might be, Sota said. Indungane picked up a TV news broadcast from Wolf 359. Stratcom published a list of coalition warships that failed to check in after the shockwave and cosmic storm. We're on the list. UNS Marathon, missing and presumed lost, Prisbin concluded. The UN has already started to notify our families. When Ino's duty shift ended for the day, she handed over the bridge to Beta shift and went down to the All Ranks Club for a drink. Rylan had agreed to meet her there, but Ino was surprised to see he was not alone. The Savanti captain was standing near one of the observation windows, which offered a spectacular view of the Weeping Ghost Nebula. He appeared to be having an argument with a plantoid. Ino quickly realized he was talking to Astro Creator Azarin. The plantoid scientist was agitated, talking quickly to get her point across. "I must insist," Azarin was saying. "Acrux 4A is the perfect subject for my experiment. I must be allowed to debark." "I can't allow that, and you know it," Rylan replied. "We are going to Binary Basin. Once we reconnect with my government, perhaps I'll receive new orders, but not before." Azarin shook her head in frustration, then spotted Ino. She spoke before Ino had a chance to do anything. "Captain Esperanta, perhaps you can help me. I have identified a suitable world to test my astro-creation technology. It is located in the same system where the Caravaneers and our Savanti allies are going. I insist on being allowed to take my Varium to Acrux 4A while the rest of you carry on to Binary Basin." Ino was dumbstruck by Azarin's brazen request. The Astro Creator was passionate about her craft, but Ino was responsible for Azarin's safety now, and she could not ignore that detail. "I'm sorry, Azarin," Ino replied. "The Desticans just lost their homeworld, and if reports from the field are to be believed, lots of other life-bearing worlds will have been damaged or destroyed as well. We can't run the risk of you or your terraforming tech being captured right now." Azarin let out an angry huff and stormed away. But just when she was about to leave the All Ranks Club, she turned around and posed an unexpected question. "Esperanta, would you sacrifice your own kind if it meant you could save lives elsewhere on a massive scale? We now live in a galaxy where that question must be answered." As soon as Azarin was gone, Rylan sighed. "Don't upset yourself. Azarin has been like this ever since Binary Basin came into sensor range." "I'm not upset," Ino replied curtly. "My scanners can see your heart rate and muscle tension," Rylan replied, tapping his biomechanical eye. "The stress you are under is normal for your workload. Commanding a crew is never easy, and I believe you are coping as well as you can, given the circumstances." Ino and Rylan sat down together. She put her head in one hand and tried to steady her breathing. "Well, at least I can relax a little more around you," Ino said. "That's very kind of you to say," Rylan said. "I've been told that a few of your crew are intimidated by my size." "Most humans aren't 7.5 feet tall," Ino said. "Other species who make up the coalition are toxoids and lithoids. Their food and atmosphere needs are so different from ours that having a multi-species crew isn't logistically possible. So, even though we have lots of alien allies, we're not used to serving together on the same ship." "I've heard your matter recycler is struggling to create edible food for the reptilian prisoners down below," Rylan said. "My people have had dealings with these marauders in the past. With your permission—" "Please," Ino gasped. "Please help us out. I'll owe you afterward." Rylan waved a hand. "You and I still have not gone on our agreed-upon date. That can be your way of saying thanks." "Day after tomorrow," Ino said. "After my meeting with the Caravaneer leader, all right? I'm gonna need a way to burn off stress after talking to Aranoe." When Ino went back on duty, Prisbin was there to brief her about the upcoming conference. "Our military intelligence team in the CIC has been keeping a close eye on the Caravaneers. Aranoe is frightened of the Desticans and doesn't want to fly through Destican-controlled space when this is all over. We think she's going to try and strike a deal with you for safe passage to human territory, or Coalition-controlled space at a minimum." "Good to know," Ino said. "Did we ever figure out how many Savanti she pulled off that habitat station? We could try to negotiate for their freedom." Now you're thinking like a pathfinder, Prisbin said with a smile. It looks like there are about 250,000 enslaved people aboard the Caravaneer fleet, most of whom are being held aboard the 6 galleon-class starships at the center of the fleet. We've detected humanoids, reptilians, aquatics, lithoids, toxoids, cyborgs, and cybernetic life forms. A cross-section of sentient life in the Orion Arm. Ino swore. The Marathon could support no more than 4,000 people on a good day. She was in a bind. Aranoe and her cadre of aquatic caravaneers boarded the Marathon via shuttlecraft. They landed in the starboard hangar and were escorted to the air boss's office for their meeting with Ino. Li Tai had adjusted the humidity setting to make her office more comfortable for her guests. When Ino arrived, the sweltering heat made her start to sweat immediately. Ino was not alone. As she sat down, she was joined by Chief Medical Officer Zapata, Chief of the Watch Zhao Hui, and Chaplain Ren Oliver. Aranoe blinked her large, black eyes, staring at each human in turn. To use one of your own expressions, we are strange bedfellows, fleeing to the same refuge, Aranoe began. I'd say that's a good way to describe our situation, Ino said, trying to find the most diplomatic way to speak to someone she actively disliked. I understand the Quantum Crossing Administrator contacted you to take some of his people to Binary Basin. 100,000 Sivanti refugees, Aranoe confirmed, to be delivered to Binary Basin as quickly as possible. Aranoe leaned forward. But there is a complication. Once this job is complete, I am expected to return to Chor's Compass, to the home port of Caravaneers. This is not possible. Why not? Ino asked, folding her hands. Currently, the Destican Astro Fellowship controls the only possible route from Binary Basin to Chor's Compass, Aranoe explained. And the Fellowship is hostile to Caravaneers. They will attack us on sight. How will you get home? The chaplain asked. There is another way, Aranoe asked. The Hodranus wormhole. It connects Savanti space directly to Coalition territory. If we could pass through the Coalition, we could reach Chor's Compass without ever crossing paths with the Desticans. So why don't you go straight to Hodranus, then? Asked Zhao Hui. Ino already knew the answer. They're carrying slaves. Everyone looked at her. Slavery is illegal on Earth. If your fleet shows up at Hodranus and tries to cross into human space with 250,000 slaves in tow, our most valuable cargo will be confiscated, Aranoe seethed angrily. There is no commodity in the galaxy more valuable than a sentient life form. Synthetics are durable and enduring. Organics will naturally reproduce. But were I to show up at Chor's Compass empty-handed, I may as well have not made the trip at all. Aranoe lowered her voice. However, if we had a friend in the Coalition military who would help us sneak through... Absolutely not, Ino said. No. You need not take direct action, Aranoe said. Your vessel is partially disabled. Your cloaking device is non-functional, as are your auxiliary cloaking sails. Why not simply jettison the useless components into space? Save yourself the mass and make the return trip easier. Perhaps a local Caravaneer fleet might offer a generous helping hand if you do. Ino stood up, her fists clenched. We want nothing from you, Ino seethed. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that Zapata and Oliver had mimicked her movement. Both of her crewmates looked incensed. A sly smile appeared on Aranoe's face. Actually, I do have something you may be interested in, Aranoe said. Like what? Ino spat. 15 years ago, the human government established a colony on a backwater planet in the Scotia system. It was located only a few light years away from Chore's compass, right on the Destican border. All 2,000 settlers were abducted by the Fellowship within a year. Aranoe stood up, and as she spoke, the atmosphere in the room darkened considerably. Humans are one of the most valuable species on the market. Your genetic diversity makes you malleable. Your ability to sweat allows you to work in the Trinitar crystal mines far longer than other races. Visari men will kill anything in their way for access to your women. Makes the fights more fun to watch. And your children are such popular and decadent delicacies on Tar Valem that they are considered a food group all on their own. Need I go on? Ino's brain seemed to have jammed. She had heard about the abducted colonists from the borderlands. They were one of the reasons the human-Destican relationship had soured before the war. But this was the first time she had ever considered the possibility that the abductees from the borderlands might still be alive. "Wait," Ino said, her voice warbling. "You have human slaves? I thought the Desticans assimilated their prisoners, turned them into necroids." "There's a big facility on Decronia where they do that," Zapata chimed in. An evil smile curled Aranoe's face, revealing her sharp fangs. "There's only one chamber of elevation, and the Desticans have taken far more prisoners than it can handle. There are billions of sentient commodities in Destican space, and there's always someone willing to make a profit. I just happened to find one. I was able to finance my fleet for 6 years by just selling 500 humans. I even had to hire a team of professional breeders to keep the herd numbers stable, but it was well worth the expense." Aranoe looked into Ino's eyes. "I've seen how much you humans value each other. So here's my new offer. Escort my fleet to Hodranas and help us slip through undetected. In return, I will let you take 50 humans from the herd. 50 humans of your choice." Ino could feel the bile rising up in her throat. She was seconds away from doing something most undiplomatic. Aranoe must have seen the flash of imminent violence in Ino's eyes, because she took a step back and said coolly, "I will await your answer aboard my ship." Within 10 minutes, Ino was back on the bridge. The Beta Shift team, who managed the marathon when Alpha Shift was off duty, jumped with surprise when she appeared. "Is something happening, ma'am?" asked one of the relief officers. "The Caravanseers just left. I thought things were going to be quiet until morning." "Change of plan," Ino said. "We need to train for a fight. Simulate a prisoner escape." "A prisoner escape?" the young officer repeated, his voice filling with fear. "We've got 90 marauders in that sorry excuse for a homemade brig, don't we?" Ino said curtly. "Simulate one of them getting loose." The young officer saw the look of determined fury in Ino's face and complied. He ran to the captain's chair and pushed the intercom button, broadcasting his own voice throughout the ship. "All hands, this is the bridge. Prisoner escape! Prisoner escape! This is a drill. All hands to your battle stations. Up and forward on your starboard side, down and aft on your port side. This is a drill. This is a drill." Ino watched as the marathon came to life around her. Nearly 3,000 crew roused themselves for a fight while she stood resolute on the bridge, taking stock of the allies and enemies around her, wondering which group the Caravanseers would fall into.
creeping and my sword's getting out of control.